for APR history for today. We are going to look at this painting. It's called Improvisation 28. This is the second version, 1912 oil on canvas, and the artist is Valisky Kandinsky. That's a name. I think you can classify him under a couple different umbrellas. You could put him under non-objective or abstracted painting. And I say that because they use that specific term in this particular video that was on Khan Academy. I also have that this is maybe like also classified under expressionism. And we'll start to talk a little bit about what in the world do we see being depicted here. So we see lines create with rhythm. We see colors that make bright colors pop out. However, for this particular piece, the fact that I'm saying it's completely abstract, we could actually classify it as being an abstracted painting because we still recognize some elements of the natural world, and I'll talk a little bit about that as we continue on. So, just a couple things about Kandinsky because you kind of need to know a little bit about his background and where he's coming from and in Russia, what's going on at this particular time. So, Kandinsky, he is a key figure in the 20th century. Again, he's part of like the Expressionist movement, if you want to classify him under that particular umbrella or the abstract. Moves from Russia to Germany, where he spent part of his movement that he created. He also started a movement. It's called Der, Blue, and it's spelled Blaue, and then Reiter. Reiter. And what that's going to actually mean is the Blue Rider. So basically, he's the first artist, and what I think is very important for this one, and I really can't emphasize this one enough, is he's going to be the first artist that completely goes this abstract, non-objective route, and he's making no reference to any recognizable objects. However, there is some theory that some things can be classified again to certain characteristics, and we'll talk about that very shortly. What we really just need to focus on is just pure colors, lines painted on a flat surface. Okay. Kandinsky spent his early childhood in Russia. His parents instilled in him with a lot of love for music. That's important to know. Wanted to create paintings that could be as abstract and emotional as music. Again, that's going to be important because we'll talk a little bit about a particular vocabulary word that you're going to put down. Several of his canvases shared literacy source, specifically from like the Bible. So for this particular one, we could see some sort of a conflict with good and evil. There will be a time of great tribulation on earth that combines natural disasters with war, followed by an age of peace where a new heaven and earth will replace the old, which kind of is going to get into what we're going to talk about very soon. Kandinsky described this improvisation series as a manifestation of events of the inner spiritual character, and then just to talk a little bit about the title in itself. So improvisation. If you're not familiar with that, it's kind of a composition from music. It's a musical composition. And why is he doing this? Well, he's composing here with form, but still he has rooted again from I'm mentioning earlier stories from the Bible. In this particular historic moment, okay, that's about to happen. So the fact that he's associating music and painting to suggest like music, painting can signify it can mean things, take us places without representing anything concrete. This is a vocabulary word I want you to write down. It's called synthesia, okay? And it's spelled Synethesia. And basically, it's where you can hear color, and you heard me correctly, hear color, see music. Okay. And this is an actual thing. I actually had a student a few years ago said that she has this. And it's basically where Kandinsky is interested in the idea that there could be a crossing of these senses, and maybe he wanted us to hear something. And so when you're looking at this piece, I'm going to ask you the question, what do you hear? And it said in the con video, and I can agree with it. I feel like you would, if you were to hear this painting, you would hear complete chaos. There's brilliance of color. There's a hazy atmospheric, in which color really does pop. The black diagonal lines that crisscross with each other, maybe those what represent some sort of like a weapon moving through space. And I think this is an appropriate analogy because we're talking about war. This is 2 years before World War One's going to break out, and this is in the early 20th century when Russian history was filled with political chaos. So, with this being recognized as maybe like an abstracted painting, what's really important, and I think this is what Kandinsky was coming at, is he doesn't want you to recognize things of the world. Some things we can recognize of the natural world, but what he's concerned is, what Kandinsky is concerned with, is that if we could recognize these things too clearly, that our conscious minds would take over the interpretation and close off our emotional ability to respond to the pure color and form. So I think that's why it's more left as an abstracted format. There are a few things that we can associate in this painting. So if you wanted to just kind of annotate, so clearly over here on the right hand, top right hand side, we see somewhat of maybe like a mountain being represent. Maybe this has influence or biblical imagery. This could represent an ideal city, such as maybe like Jerusalem, for instance. Um, we also see the representation of maybe this could represent an apocalypse. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, if you wanted to annotate, this could represent maybe like the Great Flood. We've studied the Great Flood with Noah. Above the Great Flood, we see perhaps maybe what could be maybe some sort of like cannons. And maybe you can get the sense of them kind of being shot off, kind of in the atmosphere, somewhat of a wave effect. And down at the bottom, we can see what to me looks like eyelashes. Um, he's trying to allude to them being horses, horse and rider, um, and with the manes and arcs of the actual horses themselves. And this is going to allude to like redemption, a utopian, in which basically when I was mentioning earlier, like an apocalypse, which is basically going to wash away the old world and bring in a new world, not only by Russian Revolution but also by the First World War. So Kandinsky at this moment was convinced that he could help lead, at least in the visual realm. Many artists at this time in the 20th century had a sense that the artist could play an important role in the new civilization that was going to emerge in the 20th century. So we have a painting that is using color in a radically new way. So again, emphasizing the elements of art, color for its own sake, not to mimic, not to describe. We have line being used for its own sake. That line is abstractly moving across the surface to create a sense of rhythm, a sense of a staccato, relating to musicality in this painting was absolutely new. So for the fact that we're seeing this particular artist take on this new role, again, is something that is going to be revolutionary. Okay, over and out, Miss Howard.